Alien woman marries a humble human, unaware that he secretly loved her for 10 years. The prestigious Galactic Academy of Interstellar Relations on Proxima Centauri's third moon was known for two things: producing the finest diplomats in the quadrant and maintaining the strictest social hierarchies in the galaxy. Kiara Nelith stood at the center of it all, her bluish-white skin practically luminescent under the Academy's ambient lighting. Her silvery hair cascaded down her back in an elaborate series of braids that only the daughters of Altarian nobility could afford to maintain. The fashionable uniform she wore, tailored rather than replicated like those of common students, accentuated her graceful figure in ways that made even professors stumble over their words. "Did you hear about the new human intake?" her friend Alara whispered, leaning close as they crossed the central courtyard. "They're letting more of them in every year." Kiara's winter sky eyes narrowed slightly. "Father says it's political. The Terran Alliance is pushing for more representation." "Well, they should at least teach them how to dress properly," Alara sniffed, nodding toward a group of humans sitting by the artificial lake. Among them sat Arthur Clarke, his simple gray t-shirt and worn denim jacket, standing out starkly against the carefully curated appearances of the alien students. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he bent over a data pad, completely absorbed in his studies. When he looked up briefly, his eyes met Kiara's across the courtyard. She looked away immediately, as if the very act of acknowledging his existence was beneath her. "The diplomatic ball is next week," Alara continued. "I heard Ambassador Threll's son is attending. He's been asking about you." Kiara smiled, her long, graceful ears tilting forward in interest. "Has he? Well, perhaps I'll save him a dance." As they walked away, neither noticed Arthur watching them go, his thoughtful gaze lingering on Kiara's retreating form. The Academy years passed in a blur of diplomatic theory, interspecies etiquette, and carefully navigated social events. Kiara excelled at all three, graduating at the top of her class and immediately securing a prestigious position in the Altarian Diplomatic Corps. Arthur, meanwhile, took a different path. After graduation, he enlisted in the Joint Species Fleet, a move that surprised many who had expected him to return to Earth. Instead of diplomatic soirees, he spent his days in the unforgiving vacuum of space, rising through the ranks with quiet determination. 10 years after their graduation, the Galactic Summit was held on Altaria Prime, Kiara's homeworld. As the daughter of a prominent family and now a respected diplomat herself, she was naturally in attendance, resplendent in a gown that shimmered like starlight. "Delegate Nyleth," a deep voice spoke from behind her. Kiara turned, a diplomatic smile already fixed on her face. It faltered slightly when she recognized the man before her. Arthur Clarke stood tall and confident, his shoulders broad beneath the silver and black uniform of a fleet commander. The insignia on his chest indicated a rank that few humans had ever achieved. His once lanky frame had filled out, his jawline more defined, his chestnut hair neatly trimmed. Only his gray-blue eyes remained the same, thoughtful and intense. "Commander," she replied, struggling to place him for a moment. "From the Academy, correct? I'm afraid I don't recall your name." A flicker of something, amusement, resignation, crossed his face. "Arthur Clarke, ma'am. We had several classes together." "Of course," she said smoothly, though in truth she barely remembered him. Just another human student, unremarkable in every way. "How surprising to see you in such a position." His smile didn't waver. "Life is full of surprises, Delegate Nyleth. Speaking of which, I understand your father is heading the trade negotiations with the Terran Alliance?" "He is," she confirmed, her tone cooling slightly. "Though I fail to see how that concerns Fleet Command." "It concerns me personally," Arthur replied. "I've been assigned as the military liaison to the negotiations. We'll be working closely together in the coming weeks." Kiara's perfect composure slipped for just a moment. "I see. I look forward to it," he said, with a slight bow. "If you'll excuse me, I believe the Arcturian ambassador is trying to get my attention." As he walked away, Kiara found herself watching him with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. The awkward human boy from the Academy was nowhere to be seen in this confident, authoritative man. For the first time in 10 years, Arthur Clarke had managed to capture her full attention. Over the following weeks, Kiara found herself increasingly crossing paths with Commander Clarke at diplomatic functions. Each time she noticed something new, the way other humans deferred to him with genuine respect rather than mere protocol. How even the notoriously haughty Pleiadians seemed to value his input. The subtle way his uniform had been tailored to accommodate his broader-than-average human shoulders. "You seem distracted, daughter," her father, Ambassador Tyrrell Naleth, remarked one evening as they prepared to attend yet another reception. "The Terran negotiations are proceeding well. Are they not?" "They are," Kiara confirmed, adjusting her formal attire, a flowing gown in the traditional Altarian style that highlighted her slender figure. "Commander Clark is surprisingly knowledgeable about our customs." Her father's ears twitched forward, a sign of interest that Altarians rarely displayed in public. "Indeed, I found myself quite impressed when he greeted me with the traditional blessing of the 5 moons. Few non-Altarians bother to learn such things." "He probably memorized it from a cultural briefing," Kiara said dismissively. "Perhaps," her father replied, "though he also knew to present your mother with frost lilies, her favorite. I don't recall that being in any diplomatic handbook." Kiara frowned slightly. "He brought mother flowers?" "Last week, when you were meeting with the Centaurian delegation, he called it a human custom of respect. Your mother was quite charmed." At the reception that evening, Kiara watched Arthur more carefully. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, speaking briefly with an Arcturian general here, sharing a laugh with a human diplomat there. When he approached her family's table, he bowed with perfect Altarian form. "Ambassador Nyleth, Lady Nyleth," he greeted her parents. Then, turning to Kiara with a slight smile, "Delegate Nyleth." "Commander," she acknowledged coolly. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he continued, "but I wanted to personally invite your family to a small gathering at the Terran Embassy tomorrow evening. Admiral Hennessy is showcasing some cultural artifacts from Earth, including several pieces I think might interest you, Ambassador, given your appreciation for pre-space flight art." Kiara's father's eyes brightened. "How thoughtful, Commander. We would be honored." "Excellent." Arthur's gaze shifted to Kiara. "The Admiral has also arranged for a demonstration of traditional Earth dances. Perhaps Delegate Nyleth would do me the honor of allowing me to teach her a step or two." Before Kiara could formulate a polite refusal, her mother spoke. "She would be delighted, Commander. My daughter has always been fascinated by interspecies cultural exchanges." Kiara shot her mother a look that clearly communicated she was anything but delighted, yet found herself unable to contradict her in public. "Until tomorrow, then," Arthur said with another perfect bow before departing. "Mother," Kiara hissed once he was out of earshot, "what are you doing?" "Being diplomatic," her mother replied serenely. "Besides, your father and I find the commander quite impressive for a human. Did you know he speaks 3 Altarian dialects? Even I struggle with Northern Provincial." The next evening at the Terran Embassy, Yara reluctantly allowed Arthur to guide her through something called a waltz. His hand rested lightly at her waist, the other holding hers as they moved in a circular pattern across the floor. "You're a quick study," he commented as she mastered the basic steps. "Altarians are naturally graceful," she replied stiffly. "So I've noticed." His voice held a hint of amusement. "Though I've always thought it was more than physical grace that made your people remarkable. Your capacity for seeing beauty in unexpected places, for instance." Despite herself, Kiara was curious. What would a human know of Altarian aesthetics? Enough to recognize that the pendant you're wearing contains a fragment of the Celestial Falls, the most sacred natural formation on your homeworld. Kiara's hand instinctively went to the jewel at her throat. "How could you possibly know that?" "I wrote my academy thesis on Altarian sacred geography," he said simply. "Your people's connection to your landscapes has always fascinated me." Before she could respond, the music changed, and Arthur adjusted their stance slightly. "This is called a tango, a bit more complex, but I think you'll enjoy it." As they danced, Kiara became uncomfortably aware of how close they were standing, how his hand guided her with confident pressure, how his eyes never left hers. More disconcerting still was the realization that her parents were watching with undisguised approval. Later that week, Commander Clark appeared at a family dinner, invited, to Kiara's shock, by her traditionally xenophobic grandfather. "The human understands honor," the old Altarian declared after Arthur had departed. "Not like those simpering Proximan diplomats always sniffing around for marriage alliances." Within a month, Arthur had somehow charmed every member of her extended family. Her cousins praised his tactical insights. Her aunts commented on his respectful manners. Even her young nephew had received a hand-carved wooden spaceship that Arthur claimed to have made himself. "This is deliberate," Kiara finally confronted him after discovering him deep in conversation with her father about Altarian poetry. "What exactly are you playing at, Commander?" Arthur regarded her steadily, his expression unreadable. "I'm building bridges, Delegate Nihilith. Isn't that what diplomacy is all about? Between species, yes. Not between yourself and my family." He stepped closer, close enough that she could detect the faint scent of something earthy and distinctly human. "Perhaps I'm interested in a more personal alliance." For the first time in her carefully controlled life, Kiara found herself completely speechless. "Commander Clark, a word." Arthur turned to find Admiral Hennessy beckoning him into a private conference room at Terran Fleet headquarters. The older man's weathered face was set in serious lines as he closed the door behind them. "Sir?" Arthur acknowledged, standing at attention. "At ease, Commander." Hennessy gestured to a chair. "I've been reviewing your progress with the Altarian Diplomatic Initiative." Arthur sat, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the sudden tension in his shoulders. "The negotiations are proceeding well, sir. The Nihiliths have been particularly receptive." "Yes, I've noticed." Hennessy's tone was dry as he pulled up a holographic display showing Arthur and Kiara dancing at the embassy function. "The entire diplomatic corps has noticed." Arthur remained silent, waiting. "The Joint Chiefs are pleased," Hennessy continued, surprising him. "Your personal approach has accelerated our timeline considerably." "Sir?" The Admiral leaned forward. "Let's be frank, Clark. Humanity needs this alliance. The Draconians have been pushing at our borders for months, and intelligence suggests they're planning something big. The Altarians have the fleet strength we need, but they've been historically reluctant to commit to mutual defense pacts." Arthur nodded slowly. "The Altarian Council values family connections above all else. They don't trust easily." "Precisely, which is why your connection to the Nihilith family is strategically invaluable." Hennessy's eyes narrowed. "The question is, how far are you willing to go for humanity's security?" A cold feeling settled in Arthur's stomach. "What exactly are you suggesting, Admiral?" "The Altarian marriage bond is legally binding across all their territories. A human married into a high-ranking Altarian family would have unprecedented access and influence." Hennessy's voice softened slightly. "I'm not blind, Clark. I've seen how you look at the Nihilith girl. This wouldn't be entirely a hardship assignment." Arthur's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, sir, manipulating personal relationships for strategic gain is exactly what the Altarians themselves do," Hennessy interrupted. "Their entire social structure is built around advantageous marriages. They'd respect you more for it, not less." "And Delegate Nihilith, what about her?" Hennessy waved a dismissive hand. "From what I understand, Altarian women have little say in their marriage arrangements anyway. Her family already approves of you. That's what matters to them." Arthur fought to keep his expression neutral, though anger burned beneath his calm exterior. What Hennessy was suggesting wasn't entirely wrong. Altarian marriage customs were indeed more strategic than romantic, but the Admiral's casual dismissal of Kiara's agency grated on him. "I need your answer, Commander," Hennessy pressed. "The Draconian situation won't wait. Are you prepared to propose a formal union to secure this alliance?" Arthur stood, his decision made. "I'll do what's necessary for humanity's security, sir, but I'll do it my way." "Just get it done, Clark. Preferably before the Galactic Council convenes next month." 2 days later, Arthur found himself in the grand gardens of the Nihilith estate, formally requesting an audience with Ambassador Tyrell. The Altarian Patriarch received him in his private study, surrounded by ancient texts and artifacts from across the galaxy. "Commander Clark," Tyrell greeted him warmly, "to what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" Arthur took a deep breath. "Ambassador, I've come to discuss a matter of great importance to both our peoples." Tyrell's long ears perked forward with interest. "Go on." "The Terran Alliance seeks to formalize our relationship with Altaria through more permanent bonds." Arthur began carefully. "As you know, our species share many values: honor, family loyalty, the pursuit of knowledge. Yet we've remained separate in times of crisis. And you believe this can change? Tyrell asked, his winter blue eyes, so like his daughter's, studying Arthur intently. I do. Arthur straightened his shoulders. With your permission, I wish to propose a formal union between myself and your daughter, Delegate Kiera Nyleth. A long silence followed, during which Tyrell's expression remained unreadable. Finally, he spoke. Such unions are rare, Commander. While not unprecedented, they require careful consideration. I understand, sir. Do you? Tyrell rose and moved to a window overlooking the garden where Kiara was visible, speaking with her mother. My daughter is precious to me, more than a political asset, more than a continuation of our bloodline. She is... He paused, searching for words. Navrsa, the light of our house. Arthur followed his gaze. She is extraordinary, he said quietly. Something in his tone made Tyrell turn to study him more closely. Your proposal, is it purely diplomatic in nature? For a moment, Arthur considered revealing everything. His decade of silent devotion, the way he'd shaped his entire career around the possibility of one day being worthy of her. But duty held his tongue. It would serve both our peoples well, he answered instead. Tyrell nodded slowly. I will discuss this with my family council. But know this, human. If you bring harm to my daughter, no alliance will protect you. I would expect nothing less, sir. 3 weeks later, to the astonishment of both human and Altarian society, the engagement was announced. Admiral Hennessy was delighted. The draconian threat seemed temporarily stalled by the news, and Arthur found himself caught between triumph and guilt as preparations for an elaborate wedding ceremony began. Kiera, for her part, had accepted the arrangement with surprising grace. It is a logical union, she told him during one of their chaperone meetings, though I admit I never imagined myself bound to a human. Arthur studied her beautiful face, wondering what she would think if she knew the truth. I hope you won't find it too great a sacrifice, and he said softly. Her winter sky eyes met his. My family believes in your worth, Commander Clark. That is enough for me. It wasn't enough for him, but for now it had to be. The morning of what should have been the final wedding rehearsal, Kiera was summoned to her father's study. She found him standing before a holographic display, his normally composed features tense with concern. Father, is something wrong? Ambassador Tyrell turned, minimizing the display with a quick gesture. Nothing that should concern you today, daughter. The preparations are proceeding well? Yes, but... She glanced at the fading hologram, catching glimpses of what appeared to be military coordinates. That looked like the Vega outpost. Has something happened? Her father sighed. Your eyes were always too sharp for diplomacy's half-truths. Yes, we've received reports of draconian vessels moving near the outpost. Likely nothing more than posturing. Does Commander Clark know? He's been summoned to an emergency briefing with Admiral Hennessy. Tyrell studied her face. You seem concerned for him. Kiara straightened. He is to be my husband. His welfare affects our family's standing. Is that all it is? Her father asked gently. Before she could answer, her mother entered, followed by a courier bearing a data crystal. This just arrived from Terran headquarters, Lady Nyleth said, her tone carefully neutral. For you, Kiara. The crystal contained a single file, a recorded message from Admiral Hennessy to Arthur, dated 3 months earlier. Kiara's winter sky eyes widened as she played it in private. Your connection to the Nyleth family is strategically invaluable. How far are you willing to go for humanity's security? The Altarian marriage bond is legally binding across all their territories. Manipulating personal relationships for strategic gain is exactly what the Altarians themselves do. The recording continued, revealing everything. The draconian threat, the military advantages of their marriage, Arthur's orders to secure the alliance through whatever means necessary. Ice formed around Kiara's heart. Every moment, every dance, every seemingly genuine interaction, all calculated, all false. A military operation disguised as courtship. She found Arthur in the garden pavilion where they were to be married the next day, still in his formal fleet uniform from the briefing. His face brightened when he saw her, then fell as he registered her expression. Kiara, what's wrong? She threw the data crystal at his feet. Was any of it real? Or was I just a convenient diplomatic target? Arthur paled as he recognized the crystal. Where did you get this? Does it matter? Answer me. He stepped toward her, but she backed away. Kiara, please. It's not what you think. Isn't it? Manipulating personal relationships for strategic gain. Those were your admiral's exact words, and you agreed. Her voice broke slightly. I actually began to believe, to think that perhaps... The orders were real, Arthur admitted, his voice low. The draconian threat is real. But my feelings... Save it, she cut him off. The wedding is canceled. I'll inform my family. As she turned to leave, alarms blared across the compound. The pavilion's communication system activated automatically. Emergency alert. Draconian vessels have attacked Vega Outpost. All fleet personnel report to defensive stations immediately. This is not a drill. Arthur's communicator buzzed with incoming orders. He glanced at it, then back at Kiara, conflict evident in his eyes. Go, she said coldly. Your duty calls, Commander. Kiara? There's nothing more to say. For a moment he looked as though he might argue. Instead, he straightened to his full height, eyes hardening with resolve. You're right. Actions matter more than words. He turned and sprinted toward the landing pad where shuttles were already preparing for emergency deployment. 6 hours later, Kiara stood in her father's study as reports flooded in from Vega Outpost. The draconian attack had been devastating. A full battle group targeting the station's civilian sectors rather than its military capabilities. They're trying to draw out our defensive fleet positions, her father explained grimly. This isn't about the outpost. It's intelligence gathering for a larger assault. And the casualties? Kiara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Would have been catastrophic without the human response. Terrell pulled up footage showing Terran vessels forming a protective barrier around the civilian evacuation ships. They prioritized saving our people over engaging the enemy. The footage shifted to show a familiar silver and black uniform. Arthur directing evacuation efforts, physically carrying injured Altarians to safety as structures collapsed around them. His face was streaked with ash and blood, some of it blue, some of it red. Commander Clark personally led the rescue operations, her father continued, against direct orders apparently. Admiral Hennessy wanted him to focus on capturing a draconian command vessel. Kiara watched as Arthur shielded an Altarian child with his own body during an explosion. He disobeyed orders? For our people, Terrell confirmed. The humans have a saying, actions speak louder than words. It seems Commander Clark believes this deeply. Later that night, as Kiara sat alone in her chambers, a message arrived. Not a recording this time, but a handwritten note delivered by a young human ensign. The Draconians have withdrawn temporarily. I'll understand if tomorrow's ceremony is canceled, but I'll be there regardless. There are truths that need telling, whether or not we wed. Arthur. Beneath his signature was a postscript. P.S. Check the Academy Yearbook, page 127. Curious despite herself, Kiara retrieved her old school records. Page 127 showed a candid photograph from a diplomatic theory lecture, herself in the front row, attentive and poised. In the background, partially obscured but unmistakable, sat a young Arthur Clark, his gaze fixed not on the lecturer, but on her, his expression one of undisguised admiration. The photograph was dated exactly 10 years ago. Dawn broke over the Nilith estate with an eerie calm that belied the emotional turmoil within its walls. The wedding pavilion stood ready, adorned with luminescent flowers and ceremonial banners that fluttered in the gentle morning breeze. Guests had begun to arrive, high-ranking officials from both species, curious to witness this unprecedented union. In her chambers, Kiara stood before a full-length mirror, her decision made. "No!" her mother gasped when she saw the garment laid out on Kiara's bed. "Daughter, you cannot be serious." "I am entirely serious," Kiara replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within. "Bring it to me." "The veil of sorrowful duty is worn only for political unions without emotional attachment," Lady Nilith protested. "It's a statement that will be understood by every Altarian present." "Then they will understand my intentions perfectly." Her mother's elegant ears drooped with distress. "Your father will be devastated. He believes the commander's feelings are genuine." "Perhaps they are," Kiara conceded, thinking of the yearbook photograph. But I must know for certain. This is my test. An hour later, whispers rippled through the assembled guests as Kiara appeared at the entrance to the pavilion. Instead of the traditional silver-white bridal gown, she wore the deep indigo of the veil of sorrowful duty, a ceremonial outfit reserved for unions of pure political necessity. The translucent outer layer shimmered with embedded mourning crystals that caught the light with each step, creating an effect of walking within a field of stars. The cultural statement was unmistakable to every Altarian present. This marriage would be a shell, a diplomatic formality without emotional content. At the altar, Arthur waited in his formal fleet uniform, freshly pressed despite the chaos of the previous day's rescue mission. A thin bandage at his temple was the only visible evidence of his ordeal. His expression remained neutral as she approached, though his eyes, those expressive human eyes, betrayed a flash of pain when he recognized her attire. Ambassador Tyrell, officiating the ceremony, faltered momentarily at the sight of his daughter. "Kiara," he murmured, low enough that only she and Arthur could hear, "are you certain of this path?" "Proceed, Father," she replied coolly. The ceremony began with traditional Altarian vows of alliance and cooperation. Arthur spoke his parts flawlessly, his deep voice carrying clearly through the pavilion. When it came time for the exchange of personal statements, a part often omitted in political unions, Kiara expected him to follow her lead and keep to the formal script. Instead, Arthur turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his despite the cultural taboo against touching a bride in mourning attire. "I had prepared different words," or he began, his voice pitched for her ears alone. But your choice of garment tells me honesty is needed more than poetry." A murmur went through the crowd. This deviation from protocol was shocking enough, but his next action silenced even the whispers. Arthur reached into his uniform pocket and withdrew a small worn leather book. "This is my academy journal," he said, placing it in her hands. "Page 43, the day we first met." Kiara hesitated, then opened the book to the indicated page. The handwriting was younger, less refined, but unmistakably his. "Today I saw her, Kiara Nyleth. She probably didn't even notice me. But how could she? She moves like she's made of starlight. I made a complete fool of myself in diplomatic theory, trying to see if she'd look my way. Note to self, dropping an entire data pad makes people stare, but not in the way you want." She turned the page, finding more entries. Day 67. Kiara answered Professor Ven's question about Altarian-Terran trade agreements. Her analysis was brilliant. I stayed after class to ask the professor for more reading on the subject. Need to understand her world better. Day 124. Saw Kiara in the gardens with her friends. They were laughing about something. I wonder what her laugh sounds like up close. The entries continued, page after page, year after year. Even after graduation, he had maintained the journal. Year 3, enlisted in the fleet today. The recruiter said with my academy background, I could be assigned to diplomatic security. Maybe someday I'll be stationed somewhere she is. Year 7, made commander today. The assignment to Proxima Station puts me in the same sector as the Altarian Diplomatic Corps. I heard she's become a full delegate now. I wonder if she's changed. Kiara looked up from the journal, her winter sky eyes wide with shock. You've kept this all this time? Every day, Arthur confirmed quietly. For 10 years. But the Admiral's orders came 3 months ago, he finished for her. 7 years after I requested transfer to the Altarian sector. 9 years after I started learning your language. 10 years after I first saw you and knew. He stopped, seeming to struggle with words that had remained unspoken for so long. The pavilion had gone completely silent. Even Ambassador Tyrell stood frozen, the ceremonial binding cord still in his hands. Knew what? Kiara whispered. Arthur's eyes met hers, gray-blue and utterly human in their vulnerability. Knew that somehow, someday, I had to find a way to be worthy of you. A single morning crystal detached from Kiara's veil and fell to the floor between them, shattering with a musical chime that echoed through the silent pavilion. The orders were real, Arthur continued. The threat is real, but they didn't create my feelings, Kiara. They just gave me the opportunity I've been waiting for. I would have found another way eventually. I've been working toward this moment for a decade. He gestured to her ceremonial garment. "If this is truly what you want, a marriage in name only, I'll honor that. The alliance matters too much to both our peoples. But I wanted you to know the truth, regardless of your decision." Kiara stood perfectly still, the journal clutched in her hands, faced with a reality she had never imagined. That this human, this man she had barely noticed and then dismissed, had shaped his entire life around the hope of standing exactly where he was now. "The ceremony awaits your response, daughter," her father prompted gently. Kiara looked from Arthur to the assembled guests, then back to the journal in her hands. Tangible proof of a devotion that had spanned worlds and years. With deliberate movements, she reached up and unfastened the mourning veil, letting it fall away to reveal the traditional silver-white bridal gown she had worn beneath it all along. "Continue the ceremony, Father," she said, her voice clear and caring. "I believe I have my answer." The grand reception hall of the Nilith estate glittered with the elite of two worlds. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the gathering, where humans in formal militaries dress mingled with Altarians in their flowing ceremonial robes. At the center of it all stood the newly wedded couple, accepting congratulations with the practiced grace of diplomats. "You're still wearing your sidearm," Kiara murmured to Arthur as they greeted yet another dignitary. "Is that a human wedding tradition I'm unaware of?" Arthur's lips quirked in a small smile. "Call it professional paranoia. The Draconians aren't known for accepting defeat gracefully." "You think they'd attack during a wedding celebration? Even they have some standards of decorum." "I think," he replied, his hands settling at the small of her back with a warmth that sent an unexpected shiver up her spine, "that I am not taking any chances with my wife's safety." The word wife hung between them, new and unfamiliar. Kiara found herself studying his profile as he spoke with an Arcturian ambassador. The strong line of his jaw, the alertness in his eyes that never fully disappeared, even as he smiled and conversed. For the first time, she allowed herself to truly look at him as her husband, not merely as a political necessity or a diplomatic arrangement. The realization that she found him genuinely attractive was both surprising and oddly thrilling. "You're staring," Arthur noted quietly when the ambassador moved on. "I'm reassessing," she admitted. "It's not every day one discovers a decade of devotion hidden in plain sight." His eyes warmed. "I have a lifetime of revelations saved up. No rush." The casual intimacy of his tone sent another of those unexpected shivers through her. Before she could respond, Admiral Hennessy approached, accompanied by a tall, thin Altarian she didn't recognize. "Commander Delegate Nilith, or should I say, Mrs. Clark now?" Hennessy's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "May I present Trade Envoy Marin from the Outer Colonies?" Arthur's posture subtly shifted, his body angling slightly in front of Kiara's. "I wasn't aware the Outer Colonies had sent a representative." "Last-minute addition to the guest list," Hennessy explained. "The envoy was most insistent on paying his respects." Marin bowed with perfect Altarian form, though something about the gesture struck Kiara as oddly mechanical. "Such a momentous union deserves recognition from all corners of the alliance," he said, his accent peculiarly flat for an Altarian. As the conversation continued, Kiara noticed Arthur's tension hadn't eased. His hand at her waist had shifted to rest closer to his concealed weapon. Following his lead, she began to observe Marin more carefully. The way he held himself too stiffly, how his eyes never quite focused in whoever was speaking. The unnatural stillness of his long ears. "Would you care for a traditional Altarian blessing, Commander?" Marin asked suddenly, reaching inside his formal robe. "I've brought a ceremonial token from the Outer Colonies." Arthur moved with startling speed, shoving Kiara aside as Marin withdrew not a token, but a compact energy weapon. The blast meant for Arthur's chest hit a decorative column instead, sending fragments of crystal raining down on the shocked guests. "Draconian infiltrator!" Arthur shouted, drawing his own weapon as chaos erupted. Security personnel converged from all directions, but 3 more guests had already pulled weapons. One of them grabbed Admiral Hennessy, using him as a shield. "The Alliance dies today," the false Marin snarled, features shifting as his holographic disguise fluctuated. Beneath the Altarian appearance, the scaled visage of a Draconian operative emerged. Kiara, recovering quickly from her shock, assessed the situation with diplomatic clarity. The infiltrators were positioned to create maximum panic, but they were outnumbered. Their goal wasn't mass casualties, it was symbolic assassination of key figures to fracture the new human-Altarian alliance. "Arthur," she called, having taken cover behind an overturned table. "They want targets of opportunity. Don't give them clean shots." He nodded, understanding her strategy immediately. "Keep everyone moving," he confirmed, then raised his voice to address the panicked crowd. "Everyone rotate positions. Don't stay still." The reception hall became a carefully orchestrated chaos as guests followed their instructions, making it impossible for the draconian assassins to isolate their primary targets. Arthur used the confusion to work his way toward the infiltrator holding Hennessy. Kiara, meanwhile, had another idea. Slipping through the crowd, she reached the environmental controls for the reception hall. With quick movements, she overrode the safety protocols and activated the ceremonial mist dispensers at maximum intensity. Thick, pearlescent fog began pouring from vents around the room, reducing visibility to near zero, except for Altarians, whose eyes were naturally adapted to see through the ceremonial mists used in their rituals. "Arthur," she called through their newly established comlink, "Altarians can see through this, Draconians can't." "Brilliant," came his reply, followed by the sound of a scuffle and a grunt of pain that made her heart skip. The next few minutes were tense chaos. Shots fired blindly through the mist. The sounds of hand-to-hand combat. Shouted orders from security personnel. Then, finally, silence. As the mist began to dissipate, Kiara made her way toward where she'd last heard Arthur's voice. She found him securing restraints on the unconscious form of the false Marin, a bruise darkening on his cheekbone, but otherwise unharmed. "Admiral Hennessy?" she asked. "Safe, minor injuries." Arthur finished with the restraints and straightened, his eyes finding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You were amazing." "We were amazing," she corrected, suddenly very aware of how close they were standing, how the adrenaline of the moment had heightened every sensation. "It seems we make an effective team." "In more ways than one." His hand reached up to brush a strand of silver hair from her face, the touch lingering longer than necessary. "I've had 10 years to imagine working alongside you, but the reality is far better than my fantasies." The heat in his gaze sent a flush of warmth across her bluish-white skin. For the first time, Kiara allowed herself to wonder about those fantasies, and to acknowledge the growing desire to explore them. Later, after security had removed the infiltrators and the reception had resumed with heightened vigilance, Arthur led her onto the dance floor for the traditional first dance. As they moved together, his hand at her waist felt different, possessive, intimate in a way that made her increasingly aware of the physical connection between them. "I believe," she murmured close to his ear, "that Altarian tradition dictates the newlyweds retire to their chambers after the ceremonial dance." Arthur's step faltered slightly. "Does it?" "Indeed." She allowed herself to press closer, feeling the solid warmth of him against her. "And I find myself suddenly very interested in cultural exchange." His eyes darkened with unmistakable desire. "I've studied Altarian customs extensively," he said, voice dropping to a register that sent pleasant shivers through her. "But there are some areas where practical experience might be educational for both of us." And as they slipped away from the reception, Kiara realized that the political marriage she had resigned herself to had transformed into something entirely unexpected. A partnership of equals, forged in crisis and sealed with a growing attraction that promised to become much more. 6 months later, the hallways of the Galactic Academy of Interstellar Relations echoed with the sounds of students rushing between classes. Kiara paused outside the lecture hall, smoothing her formal instructor's robe, a garment far more practical than the fashionable clothes she had once worn in these same corridors. "Nervous?" Arthur asked, appearing beside her with 2 cups of steaming tea. "Oddly, yes." She accepted the cup, their fingers brushing in a way that still sent pleasant tingles through her. "It feels strange to be back where it all began." Arthur's smile held a hint of mischief. "Should we stop by the lake later? For old time's sake?" "You mean where you used to sit and stare at me while pretending to study?" she teased, enjoying the slight flush that rose to his cheeks. "I wasn't always pretending," he protested. "Sometimes I was genuinely trying to memorize Altarian trade regulations while being hopelessly distracted by you." Their playful banter was interrupted by the arrival of Dean Vorex, the Academy's venerable administrator. "Professor Clark, Professor Nyleth Clark," he greeted them formally. "The students are assembled. Are you prepared for your inaugural lecture?" "As ready as we'll ever be," Arthur replied, straightening his uniform, now adorned with additional commendations following the successful resolution of the draconian crisis. The lecture hall fell silent as they entered. Nearly 300 students from 24 species watched with undisguised curiosity as the famous couple took their positions at the podium. Their course, Practical Applications of Interspecies Cooperation, had become the most requested elective in Academy history. "Welcome," Kiara began, her diplomatic training evident in her poised delivery. "I am Professor Nyleth Clark, and this is my husband, Professor Clark. 6 months ago, we stood together against a draconian assassination attempt that could have derailed the Human-Altarian Alliance. Today, we begin teaching you how diverse perspectives can become your greatest strength in crisis situations." Arthur stepped forward. "Our first lesson might surprise you. Acknowledge your biases. I spent years studying Altarian culture, yet still missed crucial insights that my wife grasped immediately during our first joint operation. And I," Kiara continued, "had dismissed human tactical approaches as primitive, only to discover their effectiveness when conventional Altarian methods failed." As the lecture progressed, Kiara found herself watching Arthur with a familiar warmth. The way he engaged with students reminded her of their wedding night, when he had approached their first intimate encounter with the same combination of respectful patience and passionate intensity. She remembered her surprise at discovering how compatible their physiologies were, despite minor differences, how his touch had awakened sensations she hadn't known were possible, how afterward, lying in his arms, she had confessed her own secret, that perhaps she hadn't been as oblivious to him during their academy days as she had pretended. There was this one time in comparative xenopolitics, she had whispered against his chest, "You challenged Professor Length's assertion about human diplomatic intentions. I remember thinking how unusual it was, a human defending his species with such eloquence and fire. I might have watched you a bit more carefully after that." His delighted laughter had been worth the admission. Now, as they concluded their first lecture to enthusiastic applause, that same sense of rightness settled over her. They gathered their materials as students filed out, many lingering to ask additional questions. "Professors," a young Altarian female approached, her winter sky eyes bright with curiosity. "Is it true you barely knew each other before your diplomatic marriage?" Arthur glanced at Kiara, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded slightly. "Not exactly," he answered. "I knew Professor Nyleth Clark for 10 years before our marriage. She, however, only truly got to know me afterward." The student's elegant ears twitched with interest. "That seems imbalanced." "It was," Kiara agreed. "But relationships often begin that way. One person seeing possibilities before the other. The important part is where they end up." After the students departed, they walked through the academy gardens, retracing paths they had once traveled separately. The setting sun cast everything in a golden glow, reminding Kiara of how much had changed in half a year. The draconian threat had been neutralized through a combination of military readiness and unprecedented diplomatic cooperation. Their wedding had indeed become the symbol of alliance that Admiral Hennessy had hoped for, though not in the calculated way he had envisioned. And somewhere between crisis and celebration, Kiara had discovered something unexpected, genuine love for the human who had waited so patiently for her notice. "I've been thinking," Arthur said as they reached the artificial lake, where he had once watched her from afar, "about starting a new journal." "Oh?" She leaned against him, enjoying the solid warmth of his body. "What would this one document?" "The next 10 years. His arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer. "Now that I don't have to admire you from a distance." Kiara turned in his embrace, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "I have a better idea. Why don't we write it together?" His smile held all the devotion of the past decade and all the promise of their future. I'd like that. Later that evening, in their academy quarters, Kiara watched Arthur as he slept beside her. The moonlight silvered his features, so different from her own, yet now so beloved. She thought about the strange path that had brought them together, his decade of patient devotion, her reluctant diplomatic acceptance, the crisis that had revealed their perfect compatibility. In the morning, they would face their students again, teaching them that differences could become strengths, that understanding could bridge the widest gaps between species. But for now, in the quiet darkness, Kiara simply marveled at how the universe had conspired to bring her exactly where she needed to be, beside a human man whose love had waited patiently for 10 years until she was ready to see it. With gentle fingers, she brushed a lock of hair from his forehead, and he stirred, reaching for her even in sleep. As she settled into his embrace, Kiara reflected that perhaps she had been the fortunate one after all, to be loved so completely for so long without even knowing it. Some treasures, it seemed, were worth the wait. 5 years later. "Tyron, don't wander too far," Kiara called, watching her 4-year-old son dart between the luminescent trees of the Academy's memorial garden. The boy paused, his winter sky eyes, so like his mother's, bright with curiosity beneath a mop of chestnut hair. "But father said the firebugs come out at dusk." Arthur appeared beside Kiara, his hand finding hers with the easy familiarity of long partnership. "I also said to stay where we can see you," he reminded gently. Tyron nodded solemnly, then immediately became distracted by something glowing in the underbrush. His bluish-white skin had a subtle pearlescence in the fading light, the perfect blend of his parents' heritage. "He has your patience," Kiara observed dryly. "And your selective hearing," Arthur countered with a grin. They watched as their son crouched to examine his discovery, his small face alight with wonder. Named after both his grandfathers, Tyrell and Henry, Tyron Nyleth Clark had become something of a celebrity in diplomatic circles. The first human Altarian child born to the couple whose union had transformed interstellar relations. What no one outside their intimate circle knew was how many nights they had spent in anxious consultation with specialists before attempting to conceive, how many genetic compatibility tests and medical interventions had been necessary. The public saw only the result, a healthy, vibrant child who embodied the best of both worlds. Professor Length asked if Tyron would make an appearance at the Founders' Day ceremony, Arthur mentioned. Apparently, the first years have a betting pool on whether his ears will become more pointed as he grows. Kiara laughed, the sound carrying across the garden. "And what did you tell him?" "That our son is not a scientific curiosity, but he's welcome to explain that to Tyron himself." Arthur's eyes crinkled with amusement. "I give him 5 minutes before Tyron has him explaining the molecular structure of those firebugs." As if on cue, Tyron came running back, cupping something gently in his small hands. "Look, it's exactly like in your journal, Father." Between his fingers, a tiny insect pulsed with bioluminescent light, the same creature Arthur had described watching with Kiara decades ago, though she had been unaware of his presence then. "So it is," Arthur confirmed, kneeling to his son's level. "Your mother and I used to watch them right here, before you were born." "Together?" Tyron asked innocently. Kiara exchanged a look with Arthur, filled with all the unspoken history between them. "Not at first," she answered truthfully. "But eventually, yes, together." As Tyron carefully released the firebug back into the wild, Kiara leaned against her husband's shoulder, reflecting on how completely her life had transformed since that fateful diplomatic reception. The reluctant political bride had become not only a devoted wife but a mother, her heart expanded in ways she could never have imagined. "Worth the wait?" Arthur murmured, echoing a question he often asked her in private moments. Kiara watched their son, this miraculous bridge between worlds, as he chased the rising swarm of firebugs with delighted laughter. In him, she saw the future, not just of their family, but of what humanity and Altarians could achieve together. "Every moment," she answered, turning to press a kiss to her husband's lips. "Every single moment.